You're listening to The Real Short Box, a comic book podcast made for geeks by geeks.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in and listening to The Real Short Box. My name is Donald, and I am here with a very special guest. I'm here with a very talented actor, one Janet Rodriguez. Thank you for joining, Janet.
Thank you for having me, Don.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun little segment we've been doing here lately. This is going to be, basically, we're going to be talking about your favorite superhero. So basically, yeah, somebody that's inspired you either in your adult life or as a kid, or something that you really thought was really cool or fun, or, you know, just like the costume. Doesn't matter, but it's your choice, your favorite superhero. So we're going to get started on that. Who are we talking about tonight?
All right, we're talking about the Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch.
Ooh, okay. Now, did the Wanda Vision influence you at all in this choice, or was this prior to that?
I liked her a long time before Wanda Vision.
Okay.
Yes, definitely.
But did you like Wanda Vision?
I loved Wanda Vision, although sometimes it kind of took me off track. Maybe I wanted more things to happen, but what I really enjoyed was her relationship with Vision. They did get married in 1975 in the comics, so I like that they went through the different decades together. Really showing that she fell in love with an android was great. And I really love the acting of, who's our girl, Olsen?
Yeah, Elizabeth Olsen.
Elizabeth Olsen, I think, portrays her so well. It's like kind of what I would imagine Wanda might really be like.
You know, I could see, like, she's an Olsen, and I don't know if that's characteristic of her playing, like, kind of a little bit slightly off-kilter.
Yeah.
But, you know,
it does seem like, they seem like a magical family, maybe. And what's interesting is she has sisters that are twins, and she's playing a twin.
Right, Mary-Kate and Ashley, and they all have crazy eyes, too.
Oh, yeah. They have those magical large eyes.
Yeah. So that definitely fits in with that whole I'm creating this world around me because I'm grieving type scenario.
Yeah, and you can imagine her being a mutant, I think. You can imagine Elizabeth Olsen as a mutant.
You know, it's fascinating to me, like, how there's a difference in the grieving process. So, and I just talked about this in our last one that we did for the favorite superhero, and we talked about Hal Jordan and how he grieved. He basically went crazy and thought that if he collected every Green Lantern's ring, he could bring back everybody that he loved from the city that was decimated and everybody was killed in the city that he grew up in, basically, or he was living in at the time. And his process of grief was to recreate same as Wanda's, but she didn't feel it necessary to kill anybody in order to create that because she already had that power within her, where Hal didn't think he had that power within him or was sure he didn't and needed more power. So the question would be, if Wanda if she did not have enough power to create that world around her, do you think she would have killed to get it?
Possibly, yes. She's what they call she's what they call a reluctant villain. So part of her, I think, has a sort of evil, witchy, if you will, side to her personality. She's got a dark side and a light side, and she might. Her lighter side, though, I don't know, it might prevent her from killing people, but I could see her killing so that she could feel better.
She's done some messed up stuff.
She was an Avenger, and it sounds like that, like, I'm avenging somebody's death, or, you know, you take Vision away from me, like, I could see her, like, killing people to save him.
Yeah.
So, no, totally I could see her.
She was kind of a reluctant villain, a reluctant hero. Everything with her seems to be reluctant.
Yeah, and it seems like she went through a lot of trauma, like losing her parents when she was young, although that story is revised a lot. Originally, you know, her parents were both Russian and like mutants. In another story, I believe they're German. And then later on, Magneto is her dad. So it depends on what storyline you follow, but she definitely had trauma growing up and kind of doesn't really know who she is. But one thing I think that always grounds her is that she has her twin brother. Sort of. Pietro is sort of helping her find her identity and not have as much of an identity crisis. But she kind of has, I think, a bit of a Bruce Wayne complex. Losing her parents young, having an identity crisis, like, who am I?
Yeah.
Because I don't really know what my parents are like or where I came from.
And interestingly enough, she's if she tethered herself to Pietro enough, losing that tether, she's just free floating now. She's really in her own world now, completely alone. And spoilers for those that haven't seen Wanda Vision, when we get to the end of it, she's in a cabin way out in the middle of nowhere, and she's basically projecting herself in another room, going through the Darkhold, which is a book, basically the Book of Shadows, or a book of like demonic shit. Like nothing good really comes from the Darkhold, and she's going through that, trying to figure out how she can bring back her children, and probably trying to see how she could, do other things as well. So we don't know.
Right.
It doesn't seem like the mind of a stable person there. It seems like there's that moment of calmness where she's sitting out on the porch and she's like sipping tea or something and relaxing, and then we see the inner, the inside, and we wonder if that's like inside her mind, if that's how dark it is in there, that she's trying so desperately to bring her kids back.
That's
like,
right.
She could go off. Like, basically, in the comic books, they had it to where, and I'm going to pose a question. Yeah. They had it to where she said no more mutants. And when she did that, her power's so strong that the mutant race, they could not make any more mutants. No more mutants could be created.
Right, so, she altered reality.
Right, so they it limited a whole, like, subspecies, so to speak. A whole nother Homo superior was endangered then immediately. And eventually they were able to have kids and stuff again, but it just took a long time for that story, as X-Men stories will do. Mm-hmm. So my question is, do you think that she's going to be the catalyst in the MCU for creating mutants, not eliminating mutants?
I could see that, actually. Yes, because that side of her that's proud of being a mutant, and actually a lot like her dad in the later stories, Magneto, is very proud of mutants and the mutant race.
Right.
Something in her that's a really creative idea that I could see happening. I never thought of that, but that's really creative.
Yeah, because
she'll be part of the creating mutant race.
They didn't have the rights to the X-Men when they originally went with Wanda and Pietro, and they did not state that they were mutants. They could not state that in the MCU. So now they can state that. They can go and retcon that a little bit, go back and say, oh yeah, they're mutants. So I'm very curious as to how they're going to. Everybody wants to know how they're going to bring the X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
They're like talking about Quicksilver.
Yeah.
Is it going to be Evan Peters? Is he going to infiltrate the X-Men? I don't know if they're going to use him.
And then they do that tease, those cock teases. They just gave us Evan Peters, and everybody loves him as Quicksilver.
Right.
And they gave him us in that WandaVision, and then took it away immediately.
That's right.
Immediately.
Sucks.
Like a couple episodes later.
So I was going to also say, though, my nerdy facts are that I remember I didn't get to read it or hold it for a while, but I saw online that she was in X-Men number 4 in 1964, for people that don't know.
Her first appearance?
Her first appearance. And a year later, it was part of the original, really, Avengers. So I personally would have liked to have seen her in the first Avengers movie, because she's on all those covers. She's at least on all the West Coast Avengers covers.
Oh, yeah. She's in a ton of West Coast
Her face, they would do a little rectangle with the Hulk's face, Captain America's face, Thor's face, and her face. And I'm like, she's there. And so I didn't really like that Black Widow was there in the beginning, but not her. I wanted it to be her. I kind of would have been cool with Scarlett Johansson playing the Scarlet Witch, because I was like, it is supposed to be Scarlet somebody, but she's not there.
Right. Yeah.
You look at all those comics and her face is in that little rectangle. And then she's on the cover over and over and over again of all these Avengers comics. And I'm like, where was she? Yeah, so to me, she's very much in the Avengers. And so I just wanted her to be more like active in the movies too earlier. But later comics did do it differently.
Yeah.
So everyone's idea is different. I mean, that's the nature of comics, is
Yeah.
that the stories are changing.
Based upon the writer who's writing it.
Yeah, so
100%, yeah.
a lot of the fans appreciate that the story changes. And I mean, even her story changed. Like I said, her origin story.
Well, you know that in the comic books,
So-
because Marvel did not have the rights, aka Disney did not have the rights to the mutant universe, because at the time they didn't own 20th Century Fox, and 20th Century Fox had the rights to the X-Men.
Yeah.
They, in the comic books, retconned Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch as not being the children of Magneto and actually being Inhumans. And they were pushing this whole Inhuman thing because they were going to go and create their own new, basically their X-Men. Even though the Inhumans have been around since the 60s, they thought, well, we'll go ahead and we'll create our own version of the X-Men, sort of, in an Inhuman way, and go about it that route. And they kind of dabbled in it a little bit in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for television. And even with that horrific Inhumans TV series that they tried to do. Oh my God, was it bad?
It was not at all like the comics either, huh?
No,
the TV
it's
show.
really just. Well, I mean, the comic books can be entertaining, and they were because they were involved and wrapped around the Fantastic Four. So you already have this established superhero team, and you have them reacting and interacting with these Inhumans. They weren't on their own just yet, the Inhumans. And when the Inhumans were on their own, they were lower level superheroes, so to speak. They were like the B team,
Right.
in other words. They weren't up in the upper echelon of superheroes. They weren't the Fantastic Four. They weren't the Avengers. They were the Inhumans.
That's right.
And that's a cool name, don't get me wrong. Much like the Eternals. Very cool name.
That's
But
right.
don't know if it can hold a movie. So I'm also very curious with the Eternals film, what's going to happen with that when it comes out.
That'll be interesting. I just saw that preview.
Yeah,
of
right. You saw
Eternals.
it in the Shang-Chi
But the Shang-Chi,
or
preview.
Shang-Chi.
I know, Shang-Chi.
Yeah, you got to pronounce it right. Now. You can't say Shang-Chi.
Oh, that was great though. Yes, also what I've always loved about her, I thought that she was kind of a witch. She has Agnes Harkness as her mentor, and they talk about her having hex powers, but she's not really the witch, as they say in the conventional sense. It's not actually like the Salem witches. She is a mutant by birth, and her brother is obviously a mutant. So a lot of her powers are not actually very supernatural. They're just her mutant powers. So you're always kind of trying to figure that out. Like, is she really going to do some kind of magic? She does become a sorceress, apparently, in like 2015. So some people really want her to be a witch. But it's just the name that was kind of given to this mutant girl.
Right, to her, what they call hex powers,
Right.
basically.
And
or
the fact that she
witch
can
powers.
alter reality and alter probability. And she creates this like force field where nobody can touch her. I mean, it's kind of witchy. She can also fly. She doesn't need a broomstick though.
No. No, she does not. No, she's definitely a sans broomstick.
She's very much a badass woman, but like you said, with the mental illness, that's a lot of her weakness. That's the chink in her armor. And she actually, the more I would like read about Marilyn Monroe, like I read a biography about her, kind of reminds me of Marilyn Monroe. Because she grew up also sort of orphaned. Her mom had to go away to a mental hospital. Marilyn Monroe had mental issues, but had this power over everybody, was very enchanting, had a very high IQ, actually, could cook, could do all these things, could sing, could dance, could act, was very much a triple threat. Studied Shakespeare, studied the Lee Strasberg Theater, was actually a really amazing actor, but was pigeonholed into the sex symbol. And just seemed like a very strong person, yet struggled with mental illness. And so I liken that to the Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
And the Scarlet Witch is kind of sexy. She has that cleavage with her outfit. She's got her cape. It's a very sexy look.
Oh yeah, yeah. They desexified it somewhat in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
That's right. In later years, too, they said in the comics she became more of a feminist.
Right. And, but
I think a lot of these women are feminists. It's just it was defined differently, like in the 60s.
Well, yeah, and it was also written by men.
That's right.
It's like Wonder
and drawn
Woman,
by the men.
Wonder Woman was created by a man, happened to be created by a man that created the lie detector.
Right.
So the same guy that created the lie detector. And he also had a fetish.
But he was kind of feminist, wasn't he? It was hard to tell. He was a little odd.
He liked to have her tied up a lot in very uncomfortable positions and stuff.
Right.
There was a lot of bondage when it came to Wonder Woman.
And then we found out, though, that lady that he based it off of became lesbian lovers with the other woman that they had all threesome with. I forget the woman he based it off of, but she wore bracelets. That's what he based the metal bands, the bracelets of Wonder Woman off of. Mm-hmm. And when he died, those two women lived together as so-called best friends, but everyone knows that they were lesbians. So those women were bisexual, and they were with the guy who created Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman was bisexual.
It's pretty awesome.
That's kind of interesting to think about.
But I think, like, he tied her up and he had a fetish, but these women kind of, like, would not do something that they didn't enjoy, is how it seems.
That kind of makes sense, though, with the Themyscira being all women on an island.
Right.
Like,
and he is living with the two women. That's it. He's living with these two women. But they had a good time, the three of them all together.
It kind of reminds me of...
it sounds like...
Alan Moore. Alan Moore had... he was worshipped a snake god. And his wife actually left him for another woman that they had in part of the relationship.
Wow. So that kind of thing does happen.
That can happen, yeah.
And you can't help who you fall in love with. Maybe, we don't know.
It's true.
But it's very interesting. Yeah, feminist, saying a character is feminist in the history of comics. I think a lot of these women are very strong, though, very badass, like Wonder Woman, the Invisible Woman, Scarlet Witch, She-Hulk. And not just, we think strong on the outside, and maybe a lot of them have good morals, or maybe they don't always, as with the Scarlet Witch. But they just have this, like, strong side to them that can handle a lot of stuff, a lot of trauma.
It's funny. You were talking, and you mentioned one of your other favorite characters was Harleen Quinzel.
That's right.
Harley Quinn. Also, somebody with a mental illness, so to speak.
Right.
She's very intelligent, but there's just something not quite there.
Right. And she was a psychiatrist and studied that psychotherapy. But as we say, a lot of psychology majors are crazy themselves. So they try to figure themselves out. And and then there was a turning point where she just went totally off the hinges. Yeah,
they say that people that need therapy the most go into teaching or understanding because they want to understand therapy, so they become therapists, and then it's one of those interesting things. It's not always necessarily true, of course, all the therapists that are listening to this podcast right now. We're not saying you're crazy. It's just maybe there's something that you wanted to figure out within yourself or with somebody you knew, and you got into the field because of that fascination.
I can say that about myself. I love talking about psychology. And I used to compare, though, our psychology majors in college to the actors, to the theater majors. I said, we have a lot in common. They could say that we're all crazy. The actors and the psychology majors. Yeah, a lot of actors, We're trying to understand the psychology of a character. So we're a lot like someone who's studying psychology.
That's true. If you're good at what you do.
Yes,
there's a lot of actors that don't want to do that or don't feel that that's necessary.
Different theories, too, on what good acting is.
Right. There's the method acting, which is, you basically immerse yourself within the role. And you are that character.
Yeah, and you have to weigh the same amount of weights and everything.
You have to be careful, too, because you can get too far in and start thinking, which has happened, start thinking that you are that character.
Yeah,
you don't think you're the Scarlet Witch, though, right?
No, I don't. However, my brother Frank pointed out that I have her dimensions, which was her dimensions at 5'7" and 130 pounds, were just on the back of a box of one of the action figures that they came out with in the either late 80s or early 90s.
And your brother pointed this out recently, or was it back then?
Probably in like 2008 or
Okay.
so. That's when I started to realize, oh, that's pretty cool, because I liked her anyways. And then he bought me an action figure of the Scarlet Witch.
Oh, cool.
That was cool, but those dimensions are not on that box. But they always used to have those stats.
Yeah.
Even it maybe on some G.I. Joe action figures.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
Ninja Turtles, too. They had it on the back for the Playmates.
That's where
box,
I
yeah.
think that his fascination with that started, and also WWF, because you always know the dimensions of a fighter or a boxer.
Yeah, coming in at 7 foot tall, 195 pounds, something like that.
That's
whatever
right.
It would be,
So
yeah.
if they're gonna give us the fictional weight of these action figures of these superheroes, it's like people get interested. They start to imagine if they're fighting like a boxer or a wrestler, and they're fighting really on the streets as superheroes. That would be interesting to know what their dimensions are.
Who do you think, realistically, within either the Marvel Universe, the DC Universe, or beyond, if Scarlet Witch got out of control,
Oh my gosh.
who do you think is powerful enough to take her?
Oh my
That could
goodness.
stop her.
Wow. Oh my goodness. They'd have to be pretty powerful. I mean, I would even almost say, I don't know if it seems realistic enough, but I keep thinking of the X-Men, like possibly Professor X with his mind control powers, Jean Grey, the Dark Phoenix, or Magneto, her dad. Maybe he has some kind of insight, if we're talking the storylines where he's her dad, to control her, or know where her powers are kind of coming from and intuitively overpower her.
Yeah, possibly.
Or he could say something emotionally triggering that would, although that could make her more crazy.
That could also,
But he could
definitely go the other
say
way,
something emotionally soothing also to calm her down. Like, I'm your dad. It's going to be okay. I remember this trauma that you went through. I went through all this trauma as a kid.
It's the sun's getting real dark, or whatever. How they said for
But I was thinking of Jean Grey because she is amazingly powerful.
Absolutely,
And has the mind control powers.
I think if she applied herself, she's definitely more powerful than Charles Xavier.
Right, exactly.
I think Charles has always been afraid of that.
Kind of limited. Who do you think would overpower the Scarlet Witch? Is there anyone, too, that can control reality and things like that, or probability or outcomes?
I mean, it's
Doctor Strange, probably?
It's so hard. You have to look at magical beings.
Yeah, Doctor Strange, I was thinking.
I would say Doctor Strange, possibly Doctor Fate.
People who could control time and space.
Yeah. If you can control time, you can control a lot. Kronos could do that. Our Man could do something like that.
Yeah, Our Man.
Yeah,
I love
Kang,
that.
possibly.
Oh,
Kang the
yeah,
Conqueror.
that's
He's,
right.
really good with time.
Yes.
So there's some beings out there that I think could definitely give her a run for her money.
Does the character that was played by Tilda Swinton in Doctor Strange, does she appear a lot in the comics? I forgot her.
Not so much anymore.
Yeah. Would she fight anybody like that, like the Scarlet Witch, in order to alter time or anything, or was she just like a peaceful monk type character?
No, I think if forced to, she would go in and take care of a situation. I think, but
that's neat.
I also don't think that she's somebody that really is active currently in that universe. Now, if we're talking MCU, I think they've established now that Scarlet's like the most powerful being.
Being in there. Yeah, it is
until
pretty
they
impressive.
introduce the X-Men and Jean Grey and stuff, that's probably where it's going to stand for a while. So everybody's probably, at this point, a little leery of her. Yeah. And we haven't seen... in the Legends of the Ten Rings and stuff, they didn't really go into that because it's their own. It was kind of like Black Panther. It's its own world, and they're introducing you, and then they're going to bring him in to whatever universe they decide. If they're going to bring him into the Avengers or Defenders or what they're going to do.
This is going to get very interesting, especially with the X-Men coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, for you too, did you remember the Scarlet Witch at all in the X-Men, or things that you'd come across in your comic book reading, or more Avengers, like West Coast Avengers?
I've always associated her with the X-Men, and that's just because
That's right.
she saw herself as a mutant, and
Right.
so I associated that with being part of the X-Men. But
That and the part where Magneto's her dad. And,
right,
right.
I'm also a product of a child of the '80s, so
That's right.
in the Avengers and the West Coast Avengers, the Scarlet Witch was there all the time, so she was kind of mixed in. So really,
Yeah.
I saw both sides of that, but I never really saw her as a hugely powerful character, to be honest,
Right.
when I was younger. And that's just because I never really read
Mm-hmm.
Avenger comics so much. I read Fantastic Four
Yeah.
and some X-Men and stuff, but she wasn't in that.
Yeah,
around that
she
time.
was the most powerful in her own, Scarlet Witch comics.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was like after like 75, like when she linked up with Vision. So the more storylines that have her and Vision together seem like she's more of a badass.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than her being on the team with the X-Men or with the Avengers.
Yeah, I really loved in Infinity War
Me too.
when she was fighting to protect him.
Oh, yes. To
And
protect Vision.
Yeah, and you could see how much she loved him and cared for him. And you also saw how powerful she was. And how that power set kind of grew because of her caring for somebody and wanting to make sure that they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right.
important to note, because that's a motherly instinct. That's a feminine kind of instinct that they would instill in that character. So it makes sense within the story. It makes sense within her characterization as far as like being protective
Yeah.
of people that she cares about. So I like that a lot, and I thought that their story was one of the best stories within that film.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people didn't
I
really
like
think about
that
that,
with
but
the
I liked
love
it a lot.
story.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, this guy is an android. Can he feel anything back for her? Like, that's what everybody would wonder.
Right.
How do
anyone
I talk to.
relations, Does she have a robot penis? It's like, come on,
Yeah.
let's not think about that part. Let's think about, her being emotionally satisfied and going from there. How about
That's
that?
right. Yeah. It's really sweet. But it's hard for us to think of androids as having human characteristics.
Right.
But that's what we're saying. He's artificial intelligence. So he feels real. He feels like these are my feelings.
Yeah. Funny enough,
He doesn't just think of himself as a robot.
they tweak everything in the MCU. So originally, Vision's mind is that of Wonder Man. They took Wonder Man's persona
That's right.
and created Vision with that.
That was her partner, too. She
Yeah.
would fight with Wonder Man.
Yep. So then it became like this awkward thing where she falls in love with Vision, who's basically Wonder Man, and Wonder Man's like, "What the hell?"
It makes me think of if they were police officers and they were partners first who then fell in love with each other.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to fall in love with your partner if it's a male-female cop team.
Right. But if your partner puts her subconscious or whatever into a robot, and the robot's available, then hey, why not?
Right, but it's also
Okay.
that it's like they had a working relationship, and people like, oh, that's not going to work out. You have a working relationship with somebody, it's not going to turn into a romance,
Yeah.
or it shouldn't, or it's going to cross lines.
Right.
But she's like, I fell in love with him. Like, too bad.
Yep.
Yeah, and then she was also engaged to Doctor Doom, I think.
I don't know.
She had an
I don't remember that part.
engagement with
I mean, I know
someone in the Marvel
good deal
universe
about
like
the
that.
Scarlet Witch, but I don't know about her
In one
engagement
of-
to Doctor Doom.
Yeah,
that
one of the
also a
storylines.
person that could take her down.
Okay, there you go. So maybe their powers being matched. And I didn't read that comic, but I read that, like, online.
Okay.
That she had him as her fiance.
Interesting.
So I have to read those and look at that. And I actually got to read some of the Avengers comics with her, 60s and 70s, at the library, where you could just read them for free.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I associated her with the Avengers rather than the X-Men. But our era was, she's an X-Men. She's with the X-Men. She's with Quicksilver. She's with Magneto.
Mm-hmm.
So, right.
Yeah, that's what you see. Well, Janet, this was great. Thank you so much for being
Yay.
on. Really appreciate it.
It was really fun. Thank you.
Just to let the audience know, we do almost every week, we do a live podcast, the Real Short Box live podcast. It's on Rumble Spoon Productions YouTube channel page. You can find us there pretty much every Monday, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. We also do, usually about once a week, we do an audio podcast. Those air usually on Thursdays or Fridays. And that is on most your podcast platforms. We're on Spreaker, we're on Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio,
Twitter.
We have social media like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can find us on there. all kinds of stuff. Reach out to us if you want. We really appreciate that. And if we don't hear you or see you anytime soon, perhaps we will see you
at the comic book shop.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
This has been The Real Short Box. We'll see you at the comic shop. Thanks for listening.